Okay, I'd be freaking out probably. All right, we'll see what the boys got to say today.
It's time we talked about the inflation that's going on global servers. The prices on Japanese servers seem to be at a kind of reasonable spot at the moment, but on the Western servers or global servers, prices are indeed, for specific items, a lot higher in comparison. Now, I've had a bunch of discussions on this, whether it be on stream, or on Discord, or just with friends like, for example, Kuropi and Koichi. And if I was to focus on just one problem or one aspect of the inflation, I feel like I wouldn't be doing it justice because it's a much broader problem that we have in regards to this inflation.
Okay, so one thing I do want to mention specifically is inflation gets talked about, but it doesn't get talked about normal. It's always the comparison, global versus JP. JP or global has insane inflation, but JP doesn't. But no one has actually shown actual evidence of the difference in inflation. So like it makes me want to log in to JP and just go look at what the differences are. Because it would be one thing if someone like showed what's going on, but it's only like this versus this, global versus JP. And because of the way people tend to be about this sort of stuff, I never, ever just believe the hype. Gilbert did some comparisons on Twitter. See, that would be good to see. Hopefully he talks about that here.
Now, the first very obvious thing we have is just by looking at the scratch items coming in with New Genesis. The way Sega has designed the new system of New Genesis is where basically you have a scratch ticket, you have a whole bunch of items, and some of those items are recommended, and majority of those items, I think some can be like a little bit cheaper, but majority of them do tend to be around 500,000 Meseta at a baseline. If you try to set it any lower, it actually bumps it up to 500,000 minimum. So that's a big issue because who's to say that these are recommended? Who's to say these are going to actually pop up in the market? We've had some motions where they're only going for the base 500,000 because either maybe there's just so many of them scratched, or maybe people just don't care about those items that they have marked as recommended. Now, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this whole thing because it is a little bit weird, but it just feels like for some of these items, we're just throwing away 500,000 for the sake of it being an item that is apparently meant to be popular.
Well, yeah. So anything that's set anything that's set as a featured item is set to 500,000 minimum. Any featured item is 500,000 minimum. Now, are the featured items different on JP? Do they not have that like minimum thing? If they don't, then yeah, that makes sense as to what's going on with the inflation. I'm actually pretty curious about that too.
And I think it kind of
We do. Okay, so this is a moot point. It doesn't make any difference. If JP has the exact same thing, then what does it matter?
just feels a little bit off. So that's one thing that's kind of taking away a lot of players' Meseta right now, and it's pretty...
I'm sorry, I'm gonna stop pausing it, but it only is a moot point in the sense of comparing global to JP. It is a viable reason as to why inflation exists when it comes down to those items, because the items themselves, there's no telling that you want to spend 500,000 on that thing. It's just a Meseta sync.
Arbitrary what items are recommended and why they're recommended. It just feels like a random Meseta sync. Now, the next thing I've avoided talking about is red boxing because I don't want to contribute towards this being something that's inflating Meseta. But basically, the idea is that players are making multiple accounts and then they're transferring that Meseta to their main account once they've done their red boxes or their weeklies. And I think at this point, it's pretty obvious that this is probably how bots or RMT or real money trading bots are flooding Meseta into the market. And
Makes
what it's
sense.
worth noting as well that if anyone is doing this, they have to pay AC. They need to at least pay for the shop pass so they can then buy the items off the market to actually transfer that money across. And I think this is exactly where the bots are actually getting stockpiles of this Meseta. So
here's the problem, right? The problem comes in where Sega's still making money. Like, they're making money off of bots botting. Granted, not saying they're condoning botting, right? But the bots have to purchase AC to then be able to purchase things off the market to transfer the Meseta between accounts. Because realistically, they don't have trading available anymore. Because trading was used for RMT, right? And they pulled it out. Instead of like kind of policing it better, they pulled it out, which I understand the perspective when they're coming from in that situation itself, though I don't agree with it. I understand why it exists, right? It's annoying. But they pulled it out. So there's a conflict of interest there, right? They fix the problem. They technically make less money. Which you can always argue the fact that, oh, well, maybe all they care about is money, right? We don't really know that. We don't know specifically. And of course, the business cares about money. They want to make money. That's why it exists. It's a charity. But at the end of the day, it's something that you have to keep in mind. JP is just better overall. They're still getting crossovers and we're not. What crossover? What crossover did JP get that we didn't? I'm curious. What crossovers is JP getting right now that we don't have? JP has more players currently than global, so it might be that they're experiencing less inflation. That's possibly due to that very much could be an issue as well. It's a different market overall. Also, Era, thank you for the 2-month sub. Appreciate you. Thank you. I'm sorry, you subscribed for 13 months at tier 2. I'm so sorry. Thank you for the tier 2 sub, dude. Nice. Yeah, that's usually the case. The trade was only temporarily moved? No. Trading has been removed completely. But yeah, let's keep watching.
And they can go and sell it with real life money to players. A few days ago, SEGA did make a news post saying that they will be restricting anyone that hasn't at least completed it. I think it's around halfway through the story. They haven't done that. They won't get access to the player shop. Maybe this will help, but I feel like if we saw bots on base PSO2 getting through the tutorial, this probably isn't going to be too much of a protection against that happening. This just seems like
it might make it worse.
Punishing players instead of actually punishing bots because they'll find a way around it. I also want to talk about the legality of red boxing just really briefly. A few weeks ago, someone put in a support ticket and SEGA basically said that it's fine to do this kind of thing, like make multiple accounts, just as long as you're not contributing to real money trading or RMT. But recently, there's been reports of players getting their accounts banned for taking part in red boxing. So just a heads up, if you are taking part of this, maybe it's time to cool down a little bit on that. Otherwise, you could potentially face seeing your account banned.
See, that's... that is weird. That is very weird to me because I know for a fact that, and now I could be off about this. It's weird because the section of the TOS pretty much says you shouldn't have multiple accounts. So you have alts and things of that sort, but I'm pretty sure it's against TOS to have multiple accounts, which is exactly what Redbox is doing. So concerning.
And in SEGA's defense, preventing RMT is an ongoing thing. It's never like they do this one thing and it's fixed, because people that are profiting off of RMT will always try to find a way to keep their business going.
Of course.
So in that regard, this kind of sucks for SEGA, and it feels like for some of these systems changing, it is kind of punishing players. One of these systems may have actually already affected you, and that is buying AC off of Steam. Currently, I believe it's like a 24 to maybe even 72 hour wait time before you actually get your AC the first time you buy it, and this is another bot or scam.
24 to 48 hours, and that's not SEGA, that's Steam. That is a Steam situation that they do, not SEGA. So, well, I understand that it is definitely there. Steam does this, as well as EGS does this, but if you buy from the Microsoft Store, doesn't do it. Not SEGA.
Scam prevention thing that SEGA's put in place. The frustrating thing about that is that it only really puts a little notice in your chat log. Other than that, there's no real way of knowing why haven't I got my AC as soon as I purchased it. It seems a little bit weird. And by the time you've purchased this, you've waited those days, do you even want to spend the AC at that point? I think that is a potential that may drive players away from the game, because
only a problem one time. To be fair, this only happens the first time. Every time after it, you're good to go. But he's right. It's annoying. If you're the first time you're playing, it's actually the worst time for it to happen realistically, right? The first time you're on, like, you know what, SEGA, I'll give you the money. Here, give me the thing. And they're like, oh, but you've never done this before. And because you've never done this, we need to wait and we have to make sure this is good. And you're just like, but I gave you the money. Yeah, no, we know. But they're bots out there. We got to make sure you're not bought by waiting an arbitrary amount of time to then give you the money afterwards. It's like, well, that's dumb. Understand it, but it's dumb. Either way.
Because they want to spend the AC to buy the things they wanted to buy in that moment, not in 3 days' time. Now, this definitely affects scratch ticket item prices going up in price, especially for the more desirable ones. But I also think this currently has an effect on just standard items such as 4-star equipment that you might be trying to purchase, augment capsules, and absolutely it affects the higher the preset ability you have on any equipment. I was looking here and some of the Forces and Vialto gear, while that stuff's decent, I'm seeing some of this stuff going for upwards of like 2 to 4 million with a fixer 5 on them.
While it might seem weird for people playing on a very casual level, 1 fixes aren't insanely endgame. They're not like the absolute end all be all. At most, they're a 5% damage difference. And a 5% damage difference is not that huge. And second off, the game is so flooded. It's so flooded. We can search by preset skills, by the way, Devil May Cyclone, you're incorrect. They're so flooded that regular weapons just are worth like a K. So of course these are going to be more expensive. Of course they're going to be absolutely more expensive. There are less of them out there, and most of them are garbage. So I disagree with this, but I mean, again, it depends, right? Because it's how much money you can make off of the game versus how expensive these items are. And realistically, the more money you can make, the more expensive the items, or the less expensive the items tend to be. So the more money you make, the more expensive the items tend to be. Inflation happens because players get money. When players get more money, things go up in price. It's that simple. If you never sell something, you bring the price down.
I think another huge problem with this is the fact that currently there's not many Meseta sources in the game. Most of them are tied to your account level. In the
That is a problem.
On PSO2, we could do on each character a set of weeklies and get Meseta on each of those characters. But with New Genesis, that's shifted to account level. So once you've done your dailies and weeklies on your account, you can no longer go and do that on different characters on that account. Now,
see, though, the thing is one, on base PSO2, that was seen as a point of pay to win, because you could pay for extra account slots, get more characters, do more dailies, make more money than the average Joe. So it was seen as a point of pay to win back in base PSO2. That's why they don't do it. That's why it was so heavily changed for NGS. Granted, they went too heavy on it. It should be on a ship level, not an account level, because now it's stunting your growth on other ships, which I think is silly, and it's why I haven't actually played my other ship characters. But it is understandable. The problem is that there needs to be some form of a balance of how much money you make, how much money the player can make, versus how much something is, how expensive it is. Because we can complain every day of the week about these things being 7, 8, 9 mil. But how many of you guys spent close to 100, 200, 300 mil in base PSO2 if you were playing? And we made like what, 2 mil off of each character every week? So realistically, not that different. Not me, you didn't play base PSO2. Shut up, VT.
Now, I don't know if this would actually be a solution. I think it has a potential to actually just make things worse, because players getting access to more Meseta is just going to drive things up even higher.
Exactly.
And I think in that regard, for brand new players, it's probably going to make it harder for them to get into the game, especially with the amount of content we've got right now. Once we do start to get content, it feels a little bit weird to have limited content and all the items in the game are ridiculously expensive. I feel like being this early into the game's lifespan, it feels like, and I'm just saying feels like, I'm not saying it should or shouldn't be, it just kind of feels like for me that those items shouldn't be as high as they're getting at the moment. But I think that really just feeds into another problem. I think another reason why the prices are so high on the market at the moment is because the population is a lot smaller than it was, especially after launch, because man, did it drop right after launch. And you know, supply and demand, the less players there are, the more coveted the items are, it means those prices are going to be higher in comparison to if there were more players and there wasn't more of an abundance of those items, the prices would drop quite a bit.
And that is the real problem. That is the issue itself when it comes to inflation. It is supply and demand. Things would not be this expensive if one, people didn't pay for it, and two, it wasn't so coveted. Realistically, if there's tons of the item itself and people are getting them and there's tons of players, it's not going to be that expensive. Look at what happens after a few days when something comes out. When it first comes out, it's crazy expensive because there's barely any of it. After a couple of days, because the market is completely flooded with it, it goes down almost nothing. And that's just how it goes. Pretty standard. Streamer, shoot me Sodom Sleep Fest? What are you talking about?
So I think population is a huge factor right now, and also possibly just how much of the PSO2 population for global is free to play and not actually able to put items on the market.
Also a very big problem, one I've mentioned multiple times. Players who want to help the economy can't, because they cannot access the freaking shop to sell stuff. So it's hurting the amount of stuff that we have available.
Which in turn means that they have a lot less Meseta to be able to spend on the market, And also, if they aren't spending any money to get AC at all, which means that they don't have access to shop stuff, means that they are less likely to be doing red boxing. So it's a much smaller minority that would be doing that red box trick at the moment to get more Meseta and pump more money into the market, creating this inflation. And also, obviously, people spending money on RMT when they shouldn't, not realizing that in a few months' time, their account will probably end up being banned because Sega can trace that stuff. Now, I do want to talk about AC Scratch at the moment because I think that's another thing contributing to a perfect storm in regards to inflation. And I think part of the problem is that, especially with the 9th anniversary event, we've had an abundance of scratches, pretty much one, even up to like 3 or 4 every week up until this point. The 4 meaning is obviously those rewind scratches that we saw in PSO2 NGS a few weeks ago, bringing back old emotes and weapon camos. So it's fair to say that we've roughly had a scratch every week after maintenance since the game's come out. Previously on base PSO2, for the most part, we got 1 scratch every 2 weeks. So we're already at twice the amount of scratches. There was also a period of global.
Not true. Global, we had a scratch every week. Once a week, there was a new scratch. Literally every single week. Difference is the ability to make money was vastly different, and what you wanted to spend your money on, in most cases, was not purchasable. That is actually a big factor as well. When everything you need for the game can be bought from the shop, things get expensive. But if the most important things that you need cannot be purchased from the shop, you have to get them by playing, you tend to grind more, meaning there's more stuff available, meaning things go down in price.
Base PSO2 where we didn't even have any scratches at all. We had the closed beta and part of the open beta too. I think this creates a few scenarios which are less than desirable in terms of the economy, items that are on the economy that everyone wants to access, free-to-play and paid players, and also the expectation that there's enough money in the players' wallets to buy all this stuff and, I guess, stock the market for those free-to-play players. Let's just say I've got about $100. This is kind of like an in-between of the US price and the Australian price for if I wanted to get all 45 scratches to get the bonus scratch items. Now, let's say that maybe I get paid every 2 weeks or even once a month. With the amount of scratches there are right now, I'm probably only going to focus on one of those scratches so I can get all those bonus items. I feel like I'm missing out on those items if I do spread my money across, let's say, 4 scratches in that month period. So I think with some of these scratches, you've got players focusing on the ones that maybe have more lewd stuff, maybe have really cool looking motions, and maybe the emotes are dope as well. They're focusing on those specific ones, whereas some of these other ones that maybe have some cool items on are getting neglected. So with that recent summer one, which had the swimsuits and the wet and long hair, I believe that's probably why the wet and long hair is currently like upwards of 4 million, is because maybe players only cared about that hairstyle or some of the other things in it, and majority of the items in that scratch just weren't worthwhile, and they decided to hold off on spending on that scratch and waiting for another scratch that had some more desirable items on them. Obviously, not every item on the market is super expensive. Some items that are kind of cool do tend to be pretty cheap, while other items can be pretty pricey. I think the prices will be a little bit nicer, maybe if we didn't have as many scratches as soon as we did. I think having a more accelerated flow of scratches probably lends itself to when we have a higher population. Right now, with a limited population means there's less people spending money or swiping their credit cards. There's less free-to-play players saving up their cash to buy those items on the market. So it means that the supply isn't there, and if there is any demand, the demand drives the price up pretty high. Now, another thing I want to touch on is also scratches not being content, especially when we have the headline streams. We get a lot of people kind of outraged that they're putting out all these scratches, but they're not putting out content. This is kind of a weird gray area, right? At the moment, because there's a lack of content, seeing so many scratches comes out makes it feel very unbalanced. And some would even say it makes it seem like it's greed focused rather than actually, I guess, generosity focused. Now, we do need to consider the fact that these are...
Okay, I'm going to say this before he mentions it. That way people aren't like you're just parroting off of Anamana. Scratches aren't content, and the people that work on scratches are not working on content. Okay, let me try this one more time. The people that are working on scratches are not working on in-game content. So the artists that are putting together this stuff are not the people that are creating game mechanics. They're not the people that are creating UQs. They're not the people that are creating maps for us. These are not the same people. So yes, while we aren't getting the content that we want, it is not slowing down content to have scratches come out. And that is something people need to wrap their heads around and get together, because consistently there's this mindset that, oh, we're getting all these scratches. That's all they care about. They're not pushing more forward content. They're just giving us scratches. No, it's just the one thing that's never going to get delayed, because these people are going to keep drawing this shit. You know why? Because we keep asking for it. Realistically, we can complain to the end of the earth every single day about scratches. But at the end of the day, you know what? You know what? I still want my outfit. I still want it. Give me this version of, give me the NGS version of this outfit. Hand it over. I want it. It's literally a reskin. It's literally a reskin. They're just reskinning for the NGS body, and I want it, and I'll pay for it. And you can say whatever you want. There are plenty of you guys out there that'll do the same thing. Plenty of you that will do the exact same thing. So again, these are not the same people. So stop it. Stop doing that. Game development would have been slow regardless. It's not an excuse. All right, we're gonna keep going. He's probably gonna say the same thing, but I just want to make sure that I said it first on my end. That way you guys aren't like, you're just parroting Anamana. No, we just both have brains.
Completely separate teams. We'd probably have a team working on the scratch stuff, like a design team, and then a team putting in all the art assets. And then on the other side of the building, they've probably got a team working on the content. They've got people designing some of the encounters for urgent quests. You got people designing
look at
the quest
that!
flow, all the art assets.
Oh, look at
tied to
that!
And making sure it's all balanced. So that stuff probably takes a lot more time than it does for them to push out some of this AC scratch. And not to mention that there'd also be a whole lot of sign-offs and stuff to make sure everything's right, going back to the drawing board on some things and going back, especially in regards to content, because they don't want to mess it up at this point. But what I would concede and say is that in this regard, if the content is flowing out a lot slower, then maybe they could push back some of these AC scratches or SGs. I mean, SG is probably fine because free-to-play can access it, but let's just say AC and SG scratch, that stuff could be delayed and pushed back so that it's more in line with the slower flow of content such as urgent quests, new regions, new
I will
weapon
stretch,
series,
yes.
so on and so
Pause
forth,
check chat.
actually coming out. Maybe if they went back to the scratch per every 2 weeks, that may ease things a little bit better and, I don't know, make things seem a little bit less greedy, which I will say I don't think is their intention. I think the underlying goal of them having AC Scratch is to ensure that they are paying for their servers, they're paying for the development of the game. And I think if we didn't have AC Scratch, the game's lifespan would probably be in peril. I could say that, you know, vote with your wallet. If you don't want to buy those AC Scratches, don't buy them. But at the end of the day, since they're tradable on the market, people are going to want to buy them through Meseta. And this is where it strains the relationship between free-to-play players and paid players, because free-to-play players wouldn't be able to get any of those items if those players weren't actually scratching and purchasing those AC Scratch items. It's kind of a weird symbiotic relationship. I wouldn't go into the mindset that whales are bad, because if we didn't have whales, free-to-play players wouldn't be able to buy those items at a cheaper price. And I think then there would be much more scarcity of those items on the market. Could you only imagine seeing Wet and Long going for 20 mil because 5 people scratched it? So those—
Oh shit. Yo. Alright, so here's the thing, guys. Anamana's brain is just ridiculous. See what's happening is his brain expands and it retains the wrinkles. My brain expands and it smoothens. So trying to explain this to you guys would have been more difficult for me. But he's right. It's a symbiotic relationship. Free-to-play players are like the parasites. They're just like, we need the stuff. And then the whales, they're the ones that are like, well, I'm gathering the stuff. And then it's way cheaper for you guys to buy. Realistically, are whales bad? No. No, they just are people that have disposable income, that they spend it on the game, and they make your life more difficult sometimes in games that have PvP-based content. In games like this, they're your friends. I'm not saying say thank you to the whales or you're indebted to them. I'm saying don't insult them.
Those are the problems I believe that we currently are facing with the market in terms of inflation. I would say that I'm happy that SEGA is addressing red boxing, but currently it just feels like there's not enough actual sources for players to earn Meseta, and on top of that, the lack of free-to-play shop access I think contributes to this also. Because if free-to-play players aren't earning money, they're not buying those items and, I guess, satisfying supply and demand. Part of this may even be the fact there's no fun scratch in the game, which was a source of getting those tickets. I actually think that they should add in, with how rare the 3-day passes were, they should keep that rarity for what they had in base PSO2 for NGS if they do add in a fun scratch, but I think they should have a more common 1-day pass, or even just like a 1-hour pass. Because a lot of the time, what you're waiting for when you do have those free-to-play shop access passes is you're just waiting to get one so you can put items on the market. You're probably not going to be flipping for the most part. I'm sure some people do, but I think having the option for a more time-sensitive shop pass along with the 3-day one would probably balance things out a little bit. I think potentially a lack of content, therefore, and a lack of weapon series, unit series, and other items that could be sold on the market also contributes to this as well. But I think that is probably a much larger discussion, and it's at pretty much like 13 minutes on this video, coming up to 14 minutes. I think at this point we kind of get the idea of all my points. So at this point I'm going to leave it to you. Let me know in the comments what your thoughts are on this, if you think I'm kind of hitting some notes on this, or maybe I'm a little bit short-sighted. I'd love to know. I think there are just so many factors right now, it would be off of me to just pin it all on one point. Anyway, I do have a video on how you can block and report RMT bots. If you want to check that out, I'll put it on the screen right now. You can help by letting SEGA know of the bad actors. I'm Anamana. I'll catch the next one. Have a good one. Bye.
Okay, so a few points. And I pretty much hit the nail on the head with this one. Like, it's basically exactly what we're talking about. Now, I do disagree with some stuff here and there. You know, you guys heard it during the explanation, stuff like that. But the overall goal of this video makes sense. Like, he's absolutely right. It's a perceived perceived indifference. The perception is that having less content in the game itself, while we still continue to have content in the game that promotes spending of money, while making things more difficult on the player, it's just one of those things that realistically it's just a point of contention for the player overall, right? Like, it's a point of contention. It makes things difficult on the player. We have to introduce game mechanics that make it more difficult for the player to be able to do basic things, because we're trying to keep people who are consistently breaking TOS out. And it is a fight. It's a fight that game developers have to have every single day. And unfortunately, some of the choices that they make as far as how to fight these RMTs, or how do they deal with these situations, are lazy. I don't want to say lazy, but like, some of them are the low road approach, in my opinion. Like, taking out trading, I don't think was the better choice. Realistically, there should be something like locking the market behind a specific choice, like a specific point of doing content, I think is a decent idea. While it is slightly annoying that you can't buy anything on the market, or you can't use the market until you've completed a certain amount of content, I think personally it is better than completely closing out of an option for people to do stuff. They're half-assed. I mean, like, I don't want to say they're half-assed, but they're definitely the low road choice in my opinion. Also, Dreaded Ronan, thanks for the Prime sub. Sorry I missed it earlier. Thank you. Appreciate you coming back for the 4 months, dude. But yeah, no, great movie or great video. I'm gonna link it in the comment or in the chat. Feel free to go watch. I mean, most of you guys who are here probably already have heard of Anamana, probably already watch him. Bigger channel than I am anyway, but I do like at least providing my insight to these topics, because a lot of times, most of us, I know it's crazy to think about this, but most of us are friends and we talk about a lot of these things together anyway. So like, when you're like, oh, have you made a video about this? It's like, no, this person did. We talked about it already. And that's one thing I don't want to do, is I don't want to consistently make repeat content. But I mean, you could say that reaction content's repeat content, but I mean, like, I'm taking that sort of, you know what? It's a gray area. Maybe he'll ask me not to do this anymore. We'll have to see. Anyway, guys,